Assalamu alaikum, family, peace, healing, and light, and welcome back to another episode of Healing with Angelica's podcast, where we discuss all things healing. And if you are new to the show, welcome, beautiful souls. On today's episode, we have my brother Willie Muhammad, joining us today as we'll be discussing today's topic: breaking barriers, building bridges through conflict resolution. Brother Willie, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Fine, my Allah's grace and assalamu alaikum to yourself and all of your viewers as well.
Yes, praise be to Allah. Thank you again for joining me. And for those who may not know who my brother Willie is, do you mind letting our audience know just a little bit more about
Uh,
you?
I'm the striving student minister of Muhammad Mosque number 46 in the city of New Orleans, Louisiana, which is also known as the Crescent City. So that, and in addition to that, I guess I'm striving to be a brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Praise be to Allah. Now let's get started on today's episode: breaking barriers, building bridges through conflict resolution. I'm so excited to be talking about this subject. So, in a world rent with diverse perspective and competing interests, conflict often arises,
That's right.
threatening relationships and progress. However, amongst the tension lies an opportunity for growth and understanding through effective conflict resolution. Breaking barriers, building bridges through conflict resolution explores the transformative process, opening up strategies to overcome differences and forge connections. By confronting conflict head on and fostering open dialogue, we can pave the way for collaboration, reconciliation, and ultimately a more harmonious coexistence. This episode will set the stage for an exploration into the power of conflict resolution and transcending barriers and building bridges towards a more peaceful and inclusive future. And that brings me to my first question for you, Brother Willie. So it seems like to me that you have a great interest in wanting to bridge that gap between, conflicts. So I wanted to know, like, what started your journey in wanting to become that light to help close the gap between conflict and harmony?
Mm, beautiful question. Officially, we began this conflict resolution work that I've been engaged in since 2011. Officially came out of brother Captain Dennis, Captain Emeritus Dennis Muhammad, starting what was known as the Peacekeepers, right? Which is an organization of people from various backgrounds that spend time in the communities trying to reduce violence. So here in the city of New Orleans, as a result of that type of work, we began to start doing conflict resolution. We came up with a conflict resolution hotline, and we began to start doing that work. Leading up to the 10-10-15 Justice on Else March, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, via brother Kian, Abdul Kian Muhammad, sent word back through him to me saying that this model that we use with the peacekeepers here in the city of New Orleans would become the national model for the 10,000 Fearless, right? But as we begin to start doing this conflict resolution work and the training, we've been to over 25 cities doing the training. The honorable people will come up and ask me, "Oh, where did you all go to school? Where did you all go to learn this?" And as I begin to start thinking about it, I realized that the idea, the seeds, and the example for conflict resolution has come from studying and hearing the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I'm not saying that just because I love the minister, and the minister is one of the major reasons that Allah used him as a tool to help bring me from death to life. But when I thought about it, the example of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan sitting down with Ja Rule, trying to mediate between he and 50 Cent, the minister sitting down with the hip hop artists from the East and West Coast, numerous lectures that he has given talking to the Bloods and the Crips. So those seeds were placed into my mind, and they birthed it. They what's the word I'm looking? They germinated through the work with brother Captain Dennis, and now with 10,000 Fearless.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Just even how those little seeds was implemented, just seeing the work of the minister
Mm-hmm.
trying to close that gap between the the beef that we had seen, and there is beef now, but beef between the music industry and stuff like that, to give us a way to how we can go internally and amongst ourselves to bridge that gap. So I love that. Praise be to Allah. Do you guys still have that hotline?
Yeah, we still have the hotline here in the city of New Orleans. And in fact, right before this call started, somebody called the actual hotline. You know, we are a community-based organization. In our efforts, we don't get any government funding. So the initiative is not, from my perspective, is not as well known as it should be. Some people in certain aspects of the community know about it. But my goal is that conflict resolution and this hotline becomes as common to the people here in the city of New Orleans as seeing a billboard or a commercial, or hearing or seeing a commercial for one of these fast food restaurants. We want to have it where it's so known that people are arguing about whether or not it works in barbershops and salons and in different places. That way, if they're arguing about it, then we know that people know about it. And we know that it works for those who are willing to submit to the process.
Absolutely. Do you have the number to give?
The number that we have to give right now for the conflict resolution, one second, let me get it. It's 504-321-9190. One second. Let me make sure. We come right back. We'll come back to them and make sure I pull it up.
Okay. All right? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Praise be to Allah. I love that. We definitely need that hotline number. So my next question would be, how can conflict resolution strategies, and maybe you can get into some, effectively navigate our diverse perspective and interests?
Conflict resolution, one of the major parts of conflict resolution, sister, that we're realizing why conflict exists in our community, I'm looking for this flyer, is oftentimes we're not doing something simple. Like you mentioned about how we still having conflict in the hip hop community now, where we just saw the conflict between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. And at one point it was J. Cole got into it. But if you go back and look at that, these are people who, prior to this this conflict, the masses who follow them in hip hop believe that they knew each other. But what is taking place is that what is taking place that people are not doing is not a simple call, a simple conversation is not taking place. And in the absence of a conversation, people begin to start forming these different thoughts. And then when the conversation is not taking place, we don't get the opportunity to hear another person's viewpoint about an issue, right? So when if we don't talk, so now I can sit in my mind, in my thoughts, along with the different voices and opinions and perspectives from people that's around me, telling me how to view something someone said or what somebody did. But if we went straight to it and had an actual conversation where I can actually ask somebody, what did you mean when you said this in this song? What did you mean when you do that? And we're not doing that. Even when we saw with J. Cole, you know, he came out and he apologized, but I was hoping to hear that he said a part of this apology also came as a result of he and Kendrick Lamar talking. You mean to tell me that they can't get in contact with each other? People who were once on a song together, perform together, and what is not taking place is communication. I just found the number. The number is 504-321-3190. And that's the telephone number that we have, 504-321-3190. So when we sit down, people get the opportunity to do what they have not been doing, which is listen and begin to do what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan talks about in the study guide when he says, walk in the moccasins of another individual. Walk in the shoes of another individual.
And I love that. It also takes me back to just closing the gap. I always go back to that book. It was so inspiring and insightful, just the way that, you know, he really, really dived deep into his walk and his journey and what he was actually going through. So just being able to actually, like you said, just make that call. So many things can be resolved with us just making that call and just reaching out and just asking what's going on, how can we fix this. And I know a lot of the times before I joined the nation, a lot of the times, I did just assume
Mm,
things. The Quran tells us not to do that. We definitely shouldn't go off assumption. So
mm,
I believe a lot of the conflicts also rise from just having this assumption or this perspective that this person feel this way or that way, and not actually gaining clarity.
mm.
So I definitely shoot for that. Now, I also want to know, like, how do you believe culture differences impact conflict resolution approaches and outcome?
It can, because in regards to culture, culture affects how people see things and how people handle stuff, right?
Mhm.
So in regard to, like, I've heard of some people from, let's say, from some Caribbean countries, right? And some people talk about how some of them can be very aggressive, right? Think about, like, you find some people from different coasts in America, in black communities, or from different cities that are known to be kind of very aggressive. So when you understand it, and I'll give you a real life example. There was a gentleman who was from the East Coast. I'm not going to say the city. He came here to the city of New Orleans, and he worked at the same place in the same network that I work in. And if you didn't have the opportunity to talk to him, you'd be like, man, this dude is very over aggressive, and he can be considered to be arrogant. But he
Mm,
was from a certain region where, not all, but some, they can be very aggressive, but they're very good natured people. So when I got the chance to meet him, this is the way brother is. He's very aggressive, you know, but he's a good natured person. However, he unfortunately lost his life in the streets of New Orleans, because what has been said, that he was at a local bar, and they were arguing over LeBron James.
mm,
And from where he was from and from where I'm from, I could easily tell how someone from New Orleans could be offended by the mannerism and how he talks.
mm,
He can be very aggressive, and here in the city of New Orleans, people like start feeling like, man, who you talking to? You trying to play me? And it wasn't that he was trying to play them. He was very aggressive. That's just how he just that environment. And what ended up happening is, say that the individual followed him to another spot, waited till he came out of this bar, and shot him.
mm,
So we have to take all of this stuff as it relates to conflict resolution. We have to be mindful about, right? We have to be mindful even as it relates to gender differences, how we handle stuff, even personality of people, how people handle conflict. Some people have a very confrontational way of resolving conflict. Some people don't avoid it. Some people want to approach it with reason and to reason and to be rational and intelligence and logic. Some people don't. So when we engage in a conflict resolution, this is why we first meet with each individual separately, so we can get a pulse of somebody. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had a very powerful lecture that was on YouTube. And look how these people fear the minister. They removed this lecture, and the name of the lecture was How to Settle Our Differences.
mm,
And then this lecture, the minister talked about how we should not approach conflict out of a spirit of anger. He said, if we should not approach conflict resolution out of a spirit of anger. And he said, if we find ourselves overly angry and ruled by emotion, then we need to fall back, get ourselves together, and then return to do that. And you've heard the minister offer that type of advice, giving advice to husband and wife, resolving conflict that takes place in marriage. Wait till cooler head prevails, and then let's come back. And he said that Mother Khadijah has actually done that with him.
ooh, ooh, I bear witness to that. Just ooh. It also takes me back to Minister Ishmael actually did a interview. I think it was on a master call a few years ago about I think he actually did something about settling the differences and how important it is that we kind of check our own energy
Mhm.
before we um, approach a conflict. Now, you kind of brought up something earlier, and I want us to go a little bit more in depth about it. Um, why is it important to see the view to see the view of the conflict on the other person's side you are in conflict with.
It's important because we can always be wrong. None of us are perfect. You know, one time I was at the dinner table with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in his hotel suite in Los Angeles. And the minister had something, a little debris coming from his nose. And his secretary signaled to him, sliding him a napkin. And the minister wiped his nose and he turned around, he thanked her. And he said, brother, that's why we always need someone around us who will look out for us, right? And he made this point. He said, the eye is not made to see inward, is made to see outward. And he said, sometimes there are things about ourselves that we don't see about ourselves. So one of the benefits of that is when we look at it from somebody else's viewpoint, we can see why they may be offended. And then when we look at it from their viewpoint, we can explain to them, I can see why you are offended. But this is what, when I said that, this is what I meant. And this is what I intended. And I did not mean to offend you. But being able to hear from somebody's mouth that I understand it from your perspective, that shows that we value what they say and we value their view. It don't mean that it is right, but at least we removed ourselves and humbled ourselves to look at it from somebody else's perspective. And they have to look at it from our perspective as well, because perception is not reality, even though people think it is sometimes. So it gives us one of the beautiful things when we try to get everybody, when we hear both sides of the conflict, we can see where the train got off track at, right? We can begin to start seeing what's the hindrance, what's hindering the conflict resolution, what's impacting them from not understanding what is being said. And sometimes it is personal hurt, it's emotion, it's misunderstanding. It's because what happened to them triggers something that was way in the past. And now, even though they have a conflict or they feel like they have a conflict with this person, it's really a conflict that was unresolved between them and an ex-husband, an ex-wife, or somebody from high school, right? So it helps us to be able to see and see that that I could be wrong. Let me look at it. And it puts us in one of the greatest states that we can be in, which is humility.
I love how you broke that down. Ooh, it makes me think about how we also, and I think for me, just me also just understanding just the condition of our people makes me look at our people differently, more with love, because you understand what our people been through. So just a little bit on that, like, why is it so important that we do kind of look back into the history of our people and what they've been through to kind of get more of a insight and depth of how to navigate with our people now.
Great. And listen, okay, great question. I got to jot this down so I don't forget this. Right?
That just came up on my mind.
If we go, and all of those who are watching, because as members of the Nation of Islam, we need to understand this too, because some of us have allowed the savage behavior of our people and the violence that we see being enacted against one another. Some of that is causing us to forget that our people are victims of a certain illness that has made us sick. We complain about the killing, but if you look at the word kill, K-I-L-L, if you drop the K, you get ill. There's a sickness. We're killing each other because we have an illness. So when you go back and look at the lawsuit that we filed against the ADL and those others, when you read our position, one of the tenets of that lawsuit is we're telling them, by you labeling us falsely as anti-Semitic, you are hindering our work of healing our people who've been affected by the white supremacy. It's mentioned several times through the lawsuit. A part of our theological belief is that our people act the way that they act is because they are being used as tools and slaves by Satan. And check this out. Look at the Christian theology. The whole reason why a Messiah is expected is because of what happened allegedly over 6,000 years ago with Adam and Eve in the garden. So what we're saying, I was on a show one time and his white conservative radio host said, Mr. Muhammad, why is there so much killing in the black community? I said, that's easy. It's because of the institution of slavery and the seed of self-hatred that was placed in us. And he said, oh, Mr. Muhammad, there you go, Minister Muhammad. You all want to blame the white man. I did my research before coming on the show. I said, aren't you a Catholic? He said, yes. I said, don't you believe in the concept of the original sin? He said, yes. And isn't the original sin that said what Adam and Eve did allegedly in the garden 6,000 years ago has caused, it affects mankind today? He said, yes. I said, well, how can you believe that what somebody allegedly did 6,000 some years ago can affect the world today, but what our people experienced a couple of centuries ago can affect us today? As soon as I dropped that point, he hurried up and went to break, and that was the end of that interview. So it does impact us. And we are not saying that to make an excuse. If you go through the scriptures, through the book of the New Testament, you never see Jesus blaming those who he came to cast the devil out of. Jesus' target was always Satan and the thing that possessed them. So for those who believe in, if you don't understand what we're saying, we're basically saying our people are possessed and they're possessed by the devil. And that's what we're trying to cast out of them.
Whew. Drop the mic. You broke it down.
Praise be to Allah.
Praise be to Allah. And if you are all enjoying this episode just as well as I am, please, please, please show your support by texting the word donate to 937-313-2466 today to help sustain future episodes just like this. Also, if you are enjoying all of the episodes on the broadcast here on CTG Broadcast, please show your support as well by donating today. Information to donate will be shown on your screen below. I love you all. Now let's get back to today's fire episode. Wow. Breaking barriers, building bridges through conflict resolution with my brother Willie Muhammad. Wow. You went so in depth on that. Praise be to Allah. So my next question for you is, what role does empathy play in breaking down barriers and promoting reconciliation in conflict situations?
And empathy is when you feel what somebody else is feeling, right? It plays a big role. If we can't empathize with somebody else, then we don't understand the hurt that what they are feeling. And what prevents somebody from being empathetic is either arrogance, or they have become so, what's the word I'm looking for? If they have become so immune or so desensitized to pain that they can't feel what somebody else is feeling. And look at the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, a man who said that sometimes he will sit down and hear people's problems, where he will get so caught up into it that he will begin to start feeling their pain. And until we begin to start doing that, we're not going to be able to effectively resolve conflict, to empathize with somebody. But this world has made us so selfish and so self-centered. Most people don't think about anybody else's pain outside of themselves. So it's all about how you made me feel, what you told me, what you did me. And they never pause to realize that you have done it to somebody else too. You have hurt somebody. You have done wrong against somebody. So if we can acknowledge that, shouldn't that give us a spirit to say, let me humble myself and ask for the mercy and the grace that somebody gave me, that I can that I can give it to somebody else? We have to be empathetic as well. It's very key.
That makes me think about just also incorporating forgiveness, and how, we can't count how many times Allah done forgave us and gave us mercy. Like, so just within that, like being able to incorporate forgiveness, how important is that with conflict resolution, even with yourself? Because I believe forgiving yourself first is important.
Listen, extremely important. We can't even practice the divine, what's the word I want to use? The divine system or method of reconciliation revealed to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and he made known during the historic Million Man March, if we can't forgive. Oh, Minister Farrakhan is a divine man. He's the Messiah. He's this. But when he gave us a process, and that process calls on us to forgive, people like talking about the pointing out somebody else is wrong. Yeah, that's a part. But the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan also said, another great part of that process is being able to forgive. And we follow a God as members of the Nation of Islam, as Black people in America. We benefit from God's mercy and his grace. And remember, it says in the scripture that if you hold forgiveness, you may end up finding that same forgiveness be withheld from you during the day of judgment. Like, which one of us can say that I don't want to forgive somebody? If Allah forgives. And when we forgive, it doesn't mean that we forget what happened. You see what I'm saying? But when we begin to start holding that stuff down, keeping that in us, it begins to affect us. I think somebody said not forgiving is like swallowing poison and looking and hoping that the other person dies. It's us. Right? But Allah says in the Holy Quran that his forgiveness is vast. And you mentioned something about forgiveness of self. Oftentimes, our inability to forgive others is rooted in our inability to forgive ourselves. Sister, may Allah be pleased with us, Sister Ava Muhammad, in her book, The Original Black Woman, she mentioned something. She said, oftentimes we take our limited and narrow view and inability to forgive, and we place that on Allah. So since we can't forgive, we think Allah can't forgive. When Allah is saying, look, I'm ready to throw whatever you have done in the sea of forgiveness. Of course, we got to begin to move forward and not repeat the same thing, but we move forward and begin to turn over a new leaf. But oftentimes we think like Allah is petty like us. When out of all of the 99 attributes that Almighty God Allah has, look at the first two that he decided to introduce us to. He opens up the Quran letting us know, not that I am the one who brings retribution, not that I'm the abaser, not that I'm the punisher, not that I'm the almighty. No, I'm the beneficent and the merciful. And that's an attribute that we say every time when we say Al-Fatiha. And it's in the Al-Fatiha, which is called the key. So what role does beneficence and mercy has to do with accessing the kingdom of God? And I'm close on this point. Think about this. Think about the story of Peter, right? Peter was Jesus's right-hand man. And Peter, when it came time for Jesus to go through what he did, Peter did not have the strength and ended up denying his teacher, the man that brought him from life to death. Not one time, not two times, but 3 times. Imagine how he looked the next day when he woke up, how he looked in the mirror. All this stuff this man taught me, I couldn't even answer a young girl who said, aren't you one of his disciples? I couldn't even say, yes, I am. But look at Allah's forgiveness. The same type of man that made that great mistake, he's the same man that in Christian theology, they say Peter is at the gate determining whether if somebody's going to enter the kingdom of heaven or be sent to hell. Look at God's forgiveness. That's why we can't judge anybody. We might have our judgments, but we can't put no final period on somebody else's life because we don't know what God is going to do with them. And here's another thing. we don't even know how their shortcoming in their fall is part of their development and growth to be what God wants them to be. Look at the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He credits his fall for helping to make him who he is today. But what if somebody would have judged him? Brother Minister, you didn't stand up when the nation fell. But what he learned from that helped to build the nation that we have today. Forgiveness is key in forgiving ourselves. Why can't we forgive ourselves? Like, what sin have you committed or we've committed that we can't forgive? We ain't out here, we ain't do more dirt than what the white man has done and is doing. We ain't have the audacity to go and alter the Bible and tell people lies about the reality of God. You mean to tell me God can't forgive us? He can. We have to access that forgiveness.
Ooh. Ooh, drop so many seeds. Oh my gosh.
Praise be to Allah.
Praise be to Allah. Wow. So my next question for you is, oh, where did it go? Right here. How does digital communication platforms, quote unquote, social media, impact conflict resolution efforts in modern society?
Listen, they've done articles, and your audience can go and read this, how much of the conflict that we see taking place in Chicago starts on social media. Much of the conflict, I deal with young people, much of the conflict that we see taking place in the school systems starts on social media. One of the limitations of social media is that you can't pick up a person's tone, their spirit, by what they type. There are more time there's greater evidence to say that we can misinterpret somebody's tone and spirit by what they type. There's no replacing of having a conversation to feel the person's energy to actually see, oh, this is what they meant. So it does. I just always find it interesting. We're talking about social media, how people go right to social media with their beef and how they feel instead of picking up the phone and talking to somebody. They make these posts. Yeah, such and such is hating on me, die in your envy. Well, if you can sit there and type this long paragraph, why not go and call the person and find out? Because we lack the skills, and oftentimes we lack the courage.
And that is I think that is really a big issue amongst the younger generation, the younger community, and hence of conflict resolution. And some of the conflicts that I believe I see don't really even be conflict, However, we found this sense of security in going to social media platforms in order to express ourselves or express the issues that we may have with others. And that brings me back to just thinking, why is it so important when it comes to conflict resolution that we also find a sense of, I want to say, our spiritual self and connecting to God in order to help us through resolving certain conflicts?
Repeat that again.
Yes, I'm sorry. So how important is having a spiritual connection with God in order to help us with conflict resolution?
Is extremely important. It's extremely important because, one, and connected to with the name of your show, Healing with Angelica, right? Did I pronounce that right?
Angelica.
God gives us the tools, the guidance, and his servants and the examples to show us how to heal and why we need to heal. And ultimately, God wears the attribute of not a healer, but the healer. So there's an article, and I'll make sure I send this to you. It's a very powerful article the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan did in the Essence magazine decades ago, where the minister is very transparent in talking about his shortcomings and failures as a father. And the minister said that he had to realize that once he connected his children to God, whatever shortcomings or mistakes he may have done as a father, he now had connected them to the person, the ultimate doctor and physician that can heal them. So it's extremely important. And oftentimes what happens is you see a lack of forgiveness. The more you see people away from God and not properly following God, you see people having a harder time to forgive.
Yes. Wow. Oh, praise be to Allah. What, well, do you mind providing some examples of successful conflict resolution efforts that have actually helped in varying and fostering collaborations?
Yes, definitely. There are several. There was one conflict resolution that we actually had where it was two. It was these group of children had teenagers got into a little altercation, and then one group of teenagers came back with sticks and all other type of weapons to go and confront this other group that they were fighting. And the mother of that group was like, how dare they come to my house with that? And now she began to start would begin to start feeling a certain way toward the mother of this group. But when we brought them together, the mother of the group whose children came outside of this home said, I had no idea my children even did that. See the benefit of coming together and having the benefit of coming together and having discussion. You begin to find information out that you didn't know, and it helps to bring our perceptions to a more realistic thing.
That it's just that simple. Sounds like to me just that simple, just coming together and talking. The importance of effective dialogue. So wow, that's beautiful. I know a lot of the times we're seeing just a lot of violence being used in resolving conflict. And us in the nation, we don't condone, of course we don't condone violence and or weapons. So that brings me to my next question here is, in what ways can conflict resolution techniques be applied to actually address the systematic issues such as social injustice and equality?
It can be, what comes to my mind right now, the offer by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the offer by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, which is ultimately the offer by God himself, the Muslim program, giving us our own land and all of this other type of stuff. That's Allah trying to let's resolve this conflict with them, giving them the opportunity, right? But because of arrogance and the lack of empathy and not feeling like they have done us anything wrong, people don't feel like they need to do it. In various cities, there have been efforts to put into bringing people who were mishandled by law enforcement and the victims of police brutality, and bring the police officer and this person together to begin to start doing some reconciliation to resolve the injustice. So it's very important, but people have to have the willingness and the desire to actually do it. And they have to be humble, and they have to have, be void of arrogance and ego, which blocks conflict resolution. And they have to be healed themselves, because remember it says hurt people hurt people.
And that takes me to just why important self-love is, why loving yourself is first key, first self then others, right? So for me, it took me getting to know who I am and understanding who I am to love myself, so I won't inflict the pain that I've been through onto others. And I know we talked about this during the show, but just to give more of an in-depth, just how important is us turning to ourselves and loving ourselves, so we won't conflict the pain that we've been through onto others. Why is that important? Or could you dive deep into that?
is, I mentioned today where when it says, love ye one another, even as you, or the Most High Elijah Muhammad said that the principle, the founding two principles of all religions is do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, right? We can't even do that if we don't know ourselves.
Mm.
We can't even do what Jesus said, love ye one another, even as I have loved you. If we don't know ourselves, we can't love ourselves. So that is important. So what Master Farad Muhammad brought and what the Most High Elijah Muhammad and Honorary Minister Louis Farrakhan have been doing by teaching us to know ourselves, and in knowing ourselves, we grow into love ourselves. And the Most High Elijah Muhammad said that when you begin to start growing into love of knowledge of yourself and loving yourself, your interaction with other people begin to be more peaceful and more harmonious, more of harmony, right? Rather than tense feel. Like I said before, when we begin to start working on ourselves, one of the things that we begin to start doing is we begin to start getting a handle on these triggers that we didn't know about. That's one of the things. So knowledge of self is not just knowing that we're the original Black man and woman of the planet Earth. Knowledge of self is knowing our God side and even that devilish side, that black germ and that brown germ, and then begin to start going to work with the weakness of self. So it no longer triggers us. So then we can really rise above emotion to the thinking of God. How can we rise above emotion to the thinking of God when we don't even know our triggers?
Ooh. And I love that you said that, because I'm always, and seeing, that's why it's so important to me that, I'm just so grateful for the nation. Just being able to get to know myself, I'm able to actually stop myself ahead of time before I react. So it's giving you more of a inner perspective, so you can check that inner dialogue, I believe. Since knowing who you are, what triggers you, you're able to stop yourself from making, bad decisions. So I love it so much, because I'm able to kind of like, okay, I know what upsets me. I know what frustrates me. And me not even put myself in a situation that may make me feel this way or may trigger me. Or if I am in a situation where I am triggered, thinking 5 times before I speak and being able to take a seat back, because I know I'm not going into a situation with anger, isn't a good way to kind of confront it. So praise be to Allah. It also takes me back to the importance of why us as parents, being able to teach our children the importance of handling conflict. So do you mind just speaking on just how important it is that we implement these good conflict resolution tools to our children?
It's extremely important. The first, if the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teach that the woman is the first teacher, then that means the home is the first classroom. So where do our children learn how to resolve conflict or feed into conflict? Oftentimes we develop our response and handling of conflict from what we see in our homes. And we don't even realize it, some of us, unless we do this examination, that we get this from our parents. Some of us get so angry when stuff starts going wrong, we throwing stuff and punching walls. Well, who do we see resolve stuff like that? Some of us want to fight. Who do we see resolve stuff like that? Some of us go in and slam the door and don't want to talk. Who do we see resolve stuff like that? I was just talking to, I don't know if it was a lecture or something, and I mentioned it was a lecture that we did about family. And I was talking about how it's important for us as family, as parents, and I based it upon the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's lecture, accepting the responsibility for our failure as parents. And the minister was talking about how we have to go through the process of atonement. How powerful that is for a parent to sit down with a child and go through the process of atonement and say, I am wrong. I want to atone with you. So what that does is now our children, they're not just hearing an example, but they are seeing an example and they're experiencing it from what their parents taught them. So it is greatly important because we send our children. You know how we've been taught to resolve conflict? Where are you from?
Dayton.
Dayton, Ohio, right?
Yes.
Have you ever heard this statement? You probably heard it a different way when they say, if somebody do you something, pick something up and bust them in their mouth.
Yeah. Fight back.
Fight back. That's our conflict resolution.
Yeah.
Now you in Dayton, Ohio. I've never been to Dayton. How have you heard the same thing? And I'm way in the South in New Orleans. You see? So we end up passing down these poor examples of conflict resolution, and now we're surprised that our communities are filled with blood.
Ooh. Wow. And that just makes me think of just how easy it is that how much of an influence that we have just not even being able to confront situations, and we take on these habits. A lot of the times, I believe that, we really become a duplicate of what we've been shown, the environment that we've been in. And until we're able to address that within self, then that's how we'll be able to heal. So I love that. So before we end today's show, oh my gosh, Brother Will, you have been so impactful. Like, I wrote so many notes. I just have one last question here for you. What advice would you give someone that is having a real hard time trying to actually address a conflict with someone who doesn't want to resolve it?
Well, as that saying says, it takes two to tango, right? I would say find an objective third party who can go to that person and say, this person has let us know about a conflict that existed between you all, and they want to resolve it. Conflict mediations are not meant just to have a conflict to go and sit at a table so I can read somebody and not want to resolve it. So maybe if somebody hears a third party coming and saying this person reached out and they want to resolve it, they want to get past this, maybe that will help. And if it's relating to somebody within the Nation of Islam, we got to bring in our faith. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that we can't be Muslims not wanting to resolve our issue. How are we going to be talking about standing between the gangs and guns, and we don't want to stand between a misunderstanding between two people who say that they believe in Allah coming in the person of Master Farad Muhammad? So then once we offer to resolve a conflict with somebody, and if they reject it, now the responsibility is on them. We've done our part. Now it is on them. The weight is on them because we've reached out to them to say, let's begin to start putting this healing. It's on them after that point. And there is a consequence that they can possibly face by not wanting to resolve an issue. Who wouldn't want to resolve an issue? And like, why? It doesn't mean that after we resolve it that we're going to end up being best friends. Kumbaya, that may happen, that may not happen. But at least you can hear somebody say, I apologize for the harm that I committed to you.
I love how you broke that down.
We can't deny anybody that opportunity. Just the opportunity to say, that's, how hard it is for somebody to want to come and say, I want to apologize for what I did to you. And we're going to deny that. Go and read the scripture. What Jesus said, how many times should you forgive your brother? They said 70 times. He said unlimited. And why wouldn't we, especially those of us who benefited from the mercy and the grace of Almighty God Allah? Sometimes when I'm driving in my car and somebody cuts in front of me, you do one of those things that can invoke road rage, and I want to say something to honk my horn, I stop and I ask myself, have I ever done that? And I say, yes, I have. And that helps to temper my emotions. So for those who are watching that, ask yourself, what about the people that you have offended and you wanted forgiveness? How did it make you feel when you were given forgiveness? How did it make you feel when that forgiveness and that reconciliation allow healing to take place?
Mm-hmm.
Is it right to deny somebody else that opportunity? That's not right. When we serve a God who first, we say that the black man is God and the black woman is God. The God that we know first introduced us to beneficence and mercy. So we want to be God, but we're going to leave out those attributes.
Something to think about. Wow. Praise be to Allah. Brother Willie, I just want to say thank you
Praise be
so
to Allah.
much for joining me today to discuss this amazing topic, a topic well needed, especially in this time. Breaking barriers, building bridges through conflict resolution. I would also like to thank my amazing audience and Healing Tribe for joining us today. I pray that this episode was informative, valuable, and healing to you all. Also, be sure to share, like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes on any of your favorite podcast station. Closing the Gap broadcast on Facebook, CTG broadcast on YouTube, and Healing with Angelica podcast on Facebook and YouTube to help get this message of healing to those that are in need. Give me a moment here. Also, if you are ready to start your healing journey and don't know where to start, Healing with Angelica is here to assist. If you're ready to get started on your healing journey today, just text the number READY to 937-313-2466. Information will be shown on your screen below, including our Healing Tribe merch as well. If you are interested in any of our Healing Tribe merch, just text the word TRIBE to 937-313-2466. Also, a friendly reminder that any purchase that you make is to help to sustain and support Healing with Angelica. So just keep that in mind. Brother Willie, before we end today's show, do you have any closing remarks for our audience today?
I mean, I'll close as what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. When you hear him, listen. When you see him, look at him. Where he tells you go. Where he tells you to stay away from, stay away from. If we want to heal, we have a man that can tell us who's been hurt, who shared with us how he has overcome pain from what he experienced in New York and the fall of the Nation of Islam and dealing with envy. He's here before us, not for us just to say, oh, look how patient the minister is. And then we don't work on our patience. Look how the minister sits and he listens, but we don't sit and listen to one another. He's here in our midst to be an example and a guide. Let's take advantage of his example and his guidance. Thank you.
Yes, praise be to Allah. Thank you again for joining me today, Brother Willie. And thank you all for joining us today. And we leave you all as we came. Assalamu alaikum. Peace, healing.